The story was about the tale of Mad King Mars, the greatest king on the continent of Ares, and his abnormal companions. He remained undefeated until his death, hence the Mad King Mars. Before the king died, he left behind a mysterious message, saying he had no wish to eat something so disgusting. When he was still a young prince, Mars would always turn away the food his servants gave him, pretending he wasn't hungry. He was a prince who could live in luxury. But in truth, he would always go into the forest at night eating monster meat. The taste was terrible, but he forced himself to swallow it. He hunted them down and ate their meat to survive. Back in the castle, his regular meals had been poisoned, so this was the only way he could stay alive. Mars often remembered how corrupt his kingdom had become. The prime minister, Gourmet, was a cruel man who wanted him gone. Mars had no choice but to run away from the castle. He kept eating the monster meat, wondering how long he could keep living this kind of life. One night, a woman showed up in front of him. She told him she would make him her student. She said he still had much to learn, but she saw potential in him. Mars was surprised and quickly backed off. He didn't notice her presence at all. She believed he was worthy of inheriting her blade one day. Mars asked why she thought that. She simply pointed out that he had been eating monster meat. Her answer didn't make sense to him, and it left him feeling puzzled. As they sat near the bonfire, she explained that eating monster meat slowly let humans gain the monster's strength. Mars found this idea interesting, and that moment marked the beginning of his journey. The meat, however, was not only disgusting but also poisonous. He was shocked, unsure of who this strange woman was or how she knew so much. He remembered how hard it was at first to swallow monster meat. Still, it wasn't as deadly as the food that had once killed the royal food taster. Curious, the woman asked what he meant. Even though it was a private matter, Mars told her everything. That he was a prince, that his mother had died, and that his father, the king, couldn't protect him. Because of the fight over the throne, Mars became a target. Every meal given to him was poisoned. The woman pointed out that monster meat was also poisonous. Mars agreed, saying that even though the meat tasted like crap, his body had started getting used to it. The woman found that impressive. She handed him something, warning him that his fear of poison showed he still had a long way to go. She tossed him something. As Mars looked at the ominous ring, he felt uneasy. He thanked her but also asked why she would give such a thing to someone she barely knew. She introduced herself as Cassandra. Mars was confused at first, then realized she was the legendary Red Demon Sword Saint, Cassandra. She admitted she had heard people call her that, but she didn't like the title. Mars was stunned. He had heard stories about the Red Demon, a battle-crazed warrior who brought down dragons and evil gods alike. Assuming he just received a powerful item from Saga Legend, Mars didn't hesitate to wear the ring. Not to mention, if she took him in as her disciple, he wouldn't worry about the assassinations anymore. However, at that moment, Cassandra told him it was a cursed item. It would poison whoever wore it. Then she challenged him to prove he could survive the poison. Suddenly, Mars felt his chest tighten and his thoughts spin. He thought he might die. Cassandra scolded him, saying it was pathetic to depend on tools to fight off simple poisons. She ordered him to show strength and overcome the poison spreading through his body. She said he could build resistance by winning against it. The ring couldn't be removed unless he either fought off the poison or died from it. Panicked, Mars silently protested. He accused her of putting his life in danger, but she only smiled. She said that most people would have died right away, but because Mars had been eating monster meat, he might survive. Cassandra was bad news. That was Mars' first impression as her disciple. Mars was half dead for 3 days and nights, barely clinging to life. Doctors and healers didn't have any solution to this and quickly gave up on him. Yet somehow he made it through. Even after all that, the people in the castle didn't seem to care that he had nearly died. His father scolded him, saying that it was his responsibility to protect himself. Mars wanted to argue back, wanting to say that it wasn't fair, not after everything he had just been through. Once he felt strong again, he started eating inside the castle as usual, still suspicious that the food might be poisoned. But this time, nothing happened. He was completely fine. After finally overcoming the poison, he hesitantly ate the food served in the castle. However, he can only feel a bit of kick from the poison. He felt proud and enjoyed the simple joy of eating regular food again. He knew that building up a resistance to poison hadn't been easy, but it turned out to be a very useful skill. That night, he met his master in the forest and told her that he had successfully beaten the poison. She responded by saying she always believed he could do it. He thought about how he no longer had to be afraid of deadly poison and thanked her for helping him reach this point. But then, Cassandra then handed him 2 more items, bracelets filled with gravity magic. She explained that wearing them would double his body weight. Mars's face grew serious as he realized that his training was still not over, and Cassandra was actually trying to kill him. She asked if he had continued eating monster meat, and he admitted that he hadn't eaten any in a week since he had already developed a strong resistance to poison. She didn't like his answer and quickly walked into the forest. She returned with a monster she had just defeated and threw it mid-air to chop it into pieces. She explained that the beast was a great basilisk and threw a raw piece of meat at Mars's face. She claimed he should be able to hand the meat if he had already conquered the ring's poison. Though the meat was hard to find, it was also raw. When he asked if he could cook it first, she refused, saying that cooking would reduce its effects. Mars nervously tried to eat the meat. It tasted weird and he worried it could be dangerous. Cassandra told him to swallow it, so he did. Then she asked if it felt poisonous. She explained that meat from stronger monsters was much more harmful to humans. For example, dragon meat was extremely poisonous, and she guessed that great basilisk meat was the most Mars could handle. Just one lick of it could kill 500 adults. Even so, Mars managed to force it down and hoped that would be the end of it for the day. But Cassandra told him to eat everything on his plate. Mars complained that it was too much. Cassandra then guessed he was already feeling stronger, and told him to try attacking her with his sword. Mars felt insulted because Cassandra didn't even bother to draw her own sword. So he chose to strike with all his strength in one blow. But it didn't matter. Just one kick from Cassandra was enough to make Mars look completely weak. She pointed out how far he still had to go and told him to eat more monster meat. It took a while, but Mars managed to finish all the meat while crying. From that point on, the days went by with Mars eating more monster meat and learning how to use a sword from Cassandra. Even though they only met once a week, Cassandra paid close attention and could easily tell if Mars was making progress or not. She often wondered why he wasn't getting stronger, even though he was eating monster meat. Mars once tried to cheat by avoiding the meat, but Cassandra forced him to eat it anyway, sometimes by shoving it down his throat. If he didn't take the sword training seriously, she would beat him up without hesitation. Over time, his training changed. He started fighting monsters and eating them afterward. Cassandra still believed that Mars was only able to handle weak monsters, so she carefully chose ones that he could barely defeat. But among all the monsters, Cassandra was the strongest of them all. One day she noticed that Mars had gotten better, so they had a sparring match. Cassandra used her special skill to hold back just enough so she wouldn't accidentally kill him. Still, it was always a nightmare for Mars. He couldn't keep up with her speed no matter how hard he tried. But after 3 long years of this harsh training, Mars had improved a lot. He finally caught his master's attention. He learned how to sense when others were nearby and dodge attacks. He guessed it was because his survival instincts didn't want him to get hurt by his master anymore. Those 3 years felt like pure torture. Compared to fighting Cassandra or strong monsters, dealing with the assassins back in the castle felt like a game for kids. At last, the day came when Mars had to fight a wyvern on his own. Just like his master had once done, he used a quick strike to slice the creature into pieces of raw meat. Even though a wyvern wasn't as powerful as a dragon, Cassandra was still impressed. She praised him for doing a great job and admitted that he had truly become strong. Mars simply said he had no other choice. He didn't want to die. When Cassandra asked what he meant, he explained that he didn't want to die from hunger and thanked her for everything. She also noticed how he had gotten used to eating monster meat. She asked if it felt good to grow stronger. Mars agreed and said it was now easier to deal with the assassins chasing him. Cassandra smiled and told him she had nothing left to teach. Before leaving, she reminded him not to forget his training. If he ever skipped it, she warned she'd come back and kill him for real next time. Her words left him confused. For 3 years, she had been his strict and powerful teacher, and now she just said that and walked away. Thinking back, he realized he never even asked where she lived. He guessed she traveled the world, always looking for stronger opponents. It was probably rare for her to stay in one kingdom for so long, but Mars knew he still had a long way to go. He needed to keep getting stronger if he wanted to survive. He was sure she would come back and actually try to kill him if he ever got lazy. Thanks to her training, he had already grown much stronger. What started as a desperate attempt to escape assassins had dragged him into a nightmare. He never thought meeting Cassandra would change his life like this, but if he wanted to survive the killers sent by Gammaraz, defeat powerful monsters, and avoid being killed by his own master, then Mars had no choice. He had to keep eating monster meat and keep moving forward. It had been a while since Cassandra disappeared. As always, assassins kept coming after Mars. After taking down the 10th assassin that month, he began to worry that the assassin world might soon run out of people. Still, Gammaraz didn't stop. They had forced the king to marry their daughter and have a son as part of their plan. This was why they wanted Mars gone, so they could take the throne for themselves. Somehow, the Red Demon Sword Saint became Mars's master. She trained him, even though she was also trying to kill him. Mars had no choice but to grow stronger if he wanted to stay alive. One evening, while Mars was quietly dragging away his latest target, he saw a group of young men practicing sword fighting. Curious, he stopped to watch. It felt strange to him. There hadn't been a war for 200 years, so most people stopped training for real battles. The kingdom of Fallon was at the height of peace, and sword skills were seen as useless, something only wild people would care about. Even sword duels were banned. and anyone who still trained with swords was thought to be crazy. Talking about it was already risky. Doing it could land someone in prison. Still, Mars thought these boys could help him get even stronger. He stepped out from his hiding place and asked if he could join their training. The group didn't welcome him nicely. Right away, they asked who he was, thinking he might be some spoiled noble. They looked angry and told him to leave or they'd kill him. One of them said Mars seemed to be looking down on them. Mars noticed how much they hated nobles. But then, the leader of the group told them to let Mars train with them. He warned Mars not to complain if he got himself killed. Mars thought the boy was being foolish. The boy attacked with full strength, but Mars easily beat him. The group was shocked by Mars's skill. Mars gave a small smile and told the boy he was lucky to still be alive. Normally, a hit like that would have split an assassin in half. At first, the others were angry about the loss, but they soon calmed down and knelt before Mars. Mars then told them that they would be his training partners from now on. They would meet every 7 days. He explained that since he was stronger than all 5 of them, he needed better training partners to keep improving. One of the boys complained. He said they were just training to pass the time and were already struggling with daily life. Then he mocked Mars, saying that as a noble he must be used to eating fancy food. He asked what Mars had for dinner. Mars simply answered that he had eaten red bone meat. The boy's eyes widened in shock. Ogma angrily asked if Mars really ate that meat. He thought Mars didn't know it was poisonous and that no one could defeat a red-boned beast alone. Another boy said Mars was lying and told a story about when he once ate meat from a killer rabbit. That time he vomited blood and was stuck in bed for 3 days. A different boy added that everyone knew monster meat was toxic. He asked if Mars was just trying to fool them. Mars called them ignorant for calling him a liar and warned them about something behind them. A loud roar came from a blood bear, which shook the others. Calmly, Mars thought that it might make a good meal for the next day. He killed the blood bear with ease, and the others watched in shock. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. Mars took a piece of the meat, ate it, and then offered them each a small piece. He warned them to only take a small bite because eating too much could be deadly. Despite the hesitation, Ogma took a bite. The toxicity immediately made him puke. The leader, Ogma, looked back on his time at the town and remembered how he used to see Fallon as a shitty country. As the third son of a noble family, people expected him to focus on good manners instead of learning how to fight. But he hated that idea. He believed that strength was what truly mattered. Because of this belief, many people called him a fool and laughed at him. Tired of being mocked, he decided to hide who he was. He formed a group of people who thought the same way he did and named it 100. In this group, rank wasn't based on family or status. It was based only on strength. The strongest member would always hold the top position. Over time, the group grew to more than 20 members. He trained with them every day. They were proud to call themselves the strongest group in the country. In fact, they believed they were even stronger than the knights, who they thought were just symbols without real strength. But then, someone much more powerful appeared in front of them. While Mars was eating meat from a monster, he told the others to eat more of it. However, they only stared at him in shock. He warned them that the blood bear meat was too strong for them right now. He said they should start with simpler meat first, like meat from a killer rabbit. After watching this, Ogma realized that they were only pretending to be strong. They didn't have real power, courage, or trust in each other. He bowed before Mars, recognizing his unmatched strength and calling him number 0. He asked Mars to officially join the group and lead them, hoping to learn from him. So Ogma gave Mars the title of 0 and suggested they call him Zeros to hide the fact that he was Mars. To keep his identity a secret, Mars wore a random ancient armor he had found recently, covering his whole body. He continued training with the group, but this time he used his full strength. He became much better at fighting many enemies at once. Even after he defeated them again and again, they didn't quit. They kept training until they couldn't move anymore. Not even trained assassins had that kind of determination. It was strange, but their unwillingness to give up touched something deep inside him. It showed him that their desire to grow stronger was real. As another year passed, their training stayed the same, but he began to notice that things were changing in a strange way. He saw how people reacted to monster meat and realized that those who could eat stronger monsters were praised, while those who could only handle weaker ones were seen as weak. He didn't agree with this way of thinking, but his companions were amazed that he could eat dragon meat. They wondered how many monsters he had eaten. This made him remember his past life as a prince. Back then, he was never treated with this kind of respect, and it left him feeling both proud and confused. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Black Knights of Fallon, Commander Crom asked about a group that trained hard and ate monster meat. A knight explained that the group was called the 100. They hunted monsters and ate the meat to become stronger. Some people even said that a few Black Knights were secretly part of this group. They were actually helpful because they hunted weaker monsters while the knights focused on stronger ones. Crom started to feel worried. He thought the 100 might be a dangerous cult, and he didn't like the idea of his own men joining them. To find out the truth, he decided to go undercover. That night, Crom wore a disguise and secretly joined the 100. The group welcomed him warmly. One of the instructors taught him how to eat monster meat slowly and carefully. Crom quickly noticed that the group was not what he expected. They were open to almost anyone and their training seemed organized. After seeing Crom's sword skills, the instructor said he could join their ranking battles soon, but warned him not to overdo it. The instructor also explained that eating monster meat was the group's most important rule. Even the best fighters were seen as weak if they didn't follow it. Crom was handed a piece of raw monster meat. He hesitated but forced himself to eat it. The instructor said he had also struggled with it the first time. Still, Crom felt unsure. He began to think they had found out who he really was and were trying to poison him. He became convinced that the 100 really was an evil cult. He promised himself that he would gather real evidence and bring them all down. But after a year, he changed. He discovered that monster meat was actually amazing, and his strength had grown a lot. Every night, the 100 went out to hunt monsters, ate their meat, and then tested how strong they had become. At first, he had doubted his own sanity, but chasing real strength started to feel exciting and meaningful. Over time, Crom began to look up to Zeros, the mysterious leader of the 100. Zeros had incredible skills and was even willing to teach others. Crom came to understand that trying to destroy the 100 would have been a mistake. He finally felt like he had found real purpose by being part of their group. Lately, Prince Mars had been hearing more and more talk about the 100 inside the castle. Nobles and regular people didn't always agree. Some were amazed by the group, while others didn't trust them. But Mars, now living under the name Zeros, thought this new life was much better than being a prince. When he stood before his father, the king, he gave a respectful bow. The king asked him about the 100, calling them a group that felt like a strange cult. Mars chose his words carefully as he admitted that the situation was complicated. Then Gamara spoke up, reminding everyone that Mars was still the next in line to be king. Right away, Mars felt that Gamaris might be up to something again. Gamaris kept talking, saying that even though Mars had royal blood, he hadn't really proven himself as a true prince. But then Gamaris shared an idea. He said Mars should lead a mission to defeat the group known as the 100. If Mars could pull it off, no one would question whether he deserved the throne, not just in their kingdom, but in nearby lands too. Gamaris also pointed out that Mars was good with a sword, so he seemed like the right person for the job. Mars was stunned. Did they just send him on a mission that could get him killed? He quickly thought about it and realized something worse. The 100 had earned the support of many people. If he went after them, it could ruin his name completely. He started to believe that someone wanted him to fail on purpose, maybe as payback for something. Then the king asked if Mars could carry out the mission. Mars wondered why his father was listening to Gamera so easily. Even though he had doubts and knew the risks, Mars agreed to take on the mission. After Mars left the king's room, he thought about everything that had just happened. He believed Gamaris was trying to trick him into doing something wrong, something that could destroy his chances of becoming king. Mars didn't want to fall for the trap, so he started thinking of a way to handle the situation. While he was lost in thought, he noticed a girl sitting on the sofa in his room. She looked at him, stood up, and walked toward him like they already knew each other. Mars felt surprised. He didn't know who she was or why she was in his room without being invited. At first, he wondered if she was an assassin, but then he changed his mind. Something about her felt different. She seemed calm and moved with quiet confidence. Then the girl offered him her power. She first called him Mars, but then used the name Zeros. This shocked him. He wondered how she knew that name. He had always kept his secret identity hidden from everyone. Feeling both curious and confused, he asked how she knew about him and if they had met before. With a light tone, she said he had already forgotten, just as she thought he would. Then she told him her name was Frau, and that she was his fiancée. Mars was shocked but quickly tried to stay calm. He said sorry for not recognizing her right away. When she said the name Zeros, he asked what she meant. That name brought back a wave of memories. He had worked hard for years to hide that part of himself from the world. She explained that she had been watching over him through a magical mark on her hand. The mark allowed her to see what he saw and even appear wherever he was. His eyes widened when he looked down and saw the same mark on his own hand. Suddenly, old memories came rushing back. When they were children, she had placed the mark on his hand during a simple game they played to seal their engagement. At the time, he thought it was just for fun. But now, he realized it had been something far more serious. He stood still, trying to understand the truth. Frau had been watching him for years. This discovery amazed him but also made him feel uneasy. Frau believed they had been together ever since. Her thoughts went back to the day she first met him. She was 8 years old when her father introduced Mars as her future husband. Even though he was a prince, she thought he seemed like a regular boy. Around that time, she had just learned a new spell to create a magical mark and decided to try it on him. It worked, and the pact mark was formed. Years later, when he turned 11, Mars became very sick after being poisoned. Frau later saw him eat monster meat and noticed something unusual. She believed the meat made his magic stronger. Curious and amazed by the changes she saw in him, she decided to do the same. Her magic grew stronger too. From that moment on, she never felt bored with Mars. Now older, the prince remembered when Frau once told him she could always watch over him through the pact mark. He was still trying to accept the strange and uncomfortable truth that someone had been watching his life all along and he never even knew it. Later, the prince joined a group called the 100. There he met Crom and Warren, the leaders of the Red and Black Knights. In the kingdom of Fallon, there were 4 knight groups. The White Knights protected the king and the most powerful nobles. The Blue Knights guarded the royal capital. The Red and Black Knights were sent on missions and fought monsters during times of war. Even though the prince had just joined, he felt something was wrong. The mood around the group was tense and heavy. Ogma told him to listen carefully. He explained that the country was planning to get rid of the 100, and that Crom and Warren had been ordered to lead the mission. But instead of following those orders, the 2 leaders said they wanted to help the 100. They promised to stay by Zeros's side no matter what he chose to do. Mars was confused. He didn't understand why they were so willing to follow him. The commanders told him that if everyone worked together, they could start a rebellion and win if Zeros agreed to lead them. Mars wasn't sure what to think. He wondered if they truly meant to go against their own country. To be honest, he didn't want to get involved in something as serious as a rebellion. He would rather run away and live a free life in another land. He only said 2 words: without rebellion. Everyone was left confused. Then Mars decided to reveal the truth about who he really was. He hoped that by doing so, they would understand why his situation was so difficult. When they found out he was actually Prince Mars, they were shocked. Mars hoped they would now see that as a prince he couldn't go against his own kingdom. Crom fully understood what Prince Mars meant about not wanting to start a rebellion. He said he knew exactly how the prince felt. Crom believed that Mars didn't want to rise up against the kingdom, but instead wanted to fight a real war to take back the throne that should have been his. Even so, the prince repeated that he didn't want to go against his own people. Someone else suggested that maybe the prince had been secretly preparing for this moment the whole time, gathering allies and making the 100 stronger. But Prince Mars quickly disagreed. He explained that he had never planned to build an army for a rebellion. Their group had just grown naturally over time. Even though they were strong, the royal castle was still too powerful to face head-on. The prince asked what their real chances were if they went to war with the kingdom, knowing how strong their enemies really were. Then Frau arrived with an important message. She announced that the magic division would join the fight. She said they would support Prince Mars. Crom added that Frau, who was known as the Empress of Thunder, had already explained everything to them. She promised to handle anything related to magic and said they would win the battle. The prince was surprised. He wondered if Frau had planned to fight all along. It seemed like everyone had been preparing to fight instead of running away. He couldn't believe that things had reached a point where it looked like he was leading a rebellion against his own country. He asked himself why Frau was helping him so much, especially since they were only engaged because their parents had arranged it. Frau replied that she wanted to become a true partner to him. She didn't tell him that her quick progress in magic came from copying his strange habit of eating monster meat. At first, she didn't care much about him, but now she couldn't imagine breaking off their engagement. She had grown curious about this boy who was always risking his life. She admitted that she wanted to stay by his side and was truly happy to be his fiancé. After hearing this, the soldiers stood with pride. They shouted together, saying that they would win no matter what. Then, one by one, the leaders of the rebellion were named: Commander Crom of the Black Knights, Commander Warren of the Red Knights, the Empress of Thunder Frau, Ogma, and all the members of the 100, and their leader Zeros, also known as Prince Mars. Prince Mars stood with them, still feeling a bit confused. He saw that he had joined a strong group that couldn't be broken, and everyone was already prepared to start a rebellion against the country. He knew they had a good chance of winning, but he also wondered when he had even started caring about the throne. He thought the whole situation was moving too quickly and didn't make much sense to him. Crom declared that they were ready to give their lives for Mars and said that Mars was the true heir to the throne. In the name of justice, they wanted to make sure their rebellion would succeed. When Mars was ordered to kill 100, he had only 2 choices: run away or fight back. From that moment on, there was no turning back. Mars had never wanted a war or the throne. He just wanted a peaceful life. But now, seeing the people who chose to follow him, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. After spending so much time alone and not trusting anyone, their faith in him felt heavy, but also important. Frau looked at Mars with quiet care. He was becoming a danger to the kingdom, but she couldn't look away. She walked up to him once more, promising they would win and saying she wanted to fight by his side. The day to defeat 100 had finally arrived. As Mars climbed onto his horse, a knight official came over. He noticed how tense the prince looked and reminded him to leave most of the fighting to the Black and Red Knight commanders. Mars's main goal was to face and defeat the enemy leader. The knight also warned him that if he lost, the outcome would be terrible. That moment made Mars realize something important. The White Knights, who were connected to his enemy, Gourmet, might not protect him at all. In fact, they could try to get him killed during the battle. Soon, the commanders of the Black and Red Knights arrived, fully ready to begin the fight. One of them asked to speak with the prince, but the White Knight's commander stepped in and stopped him. The commanders refused the request, saying there was no reason for Mars to talk with the 100. As the army stepped onto the battlefield, the leader of the White Knights smiled with excitement at the sight of the large army in front of him. The Black and Red Knight stood in full armor, prepared for battle. He reminded his men that the 100 were just a group of nobodies pretending to be knights, and he said it was embarrassing to treat them like real enemies. He couldn't believe that their noble order had fallen so far, and he laughed at them. Prince Mars saw that Frau and Warren were ready to fight, so he had no choice but to prepare himself. With a strong will, he raised his sword toward the castle and said their real enemy was in the imperial capital. The leader of the White Knights was surprised and tried to ask what Mars meant, but before he could finish, Mars struck him down, cutting him in half. The White Knights were left confused, while the Black and Red Knights cheered with excitement. One of the White Knights began praising Mars for his powerful strike. With a cold look, Mars said he already knew they planned to kill him no matter how the mission ended. The White Knight was shocked that Mars had figured it out. Frau said he wasn't even surprised anymore, then slashed his sword across the White Knight's neck. Not far away, another White Knight dropped to the ground begging for mercy. He claimed they were only following orders and never wanted to hurt the prince. Mars stared at him with cold eyes. Frau called them weak and said cowards like that didn't deserve to protect the kingdom. Then, he quickly ended the knight's life with one clean strike. He added that as long as people like that existed, true peace could never be reached. Heads of the White Knights flew through the air around Mars. Frau looked at him and said the White Knights had dishonored themselves. Now it was time to bring real justice to their broken kingdom. Mars gave a small smile, touched by Frau's loyalty, though something in Frau's intense eyes felt a little unsettling. Warren warned that their enemies were probably watching every move they made. Mars agreed and said they needed to move quickly and go straight to the capital. The Blue Knights had locked the castle gates and tried to keep them closed, but some of the knights changed sides and chose to support Mars. They opened the gates for him. As Mars walked through the gates with a smile on his face, the Blue Knights asked him to bring peace back to the kingdom. They thanked him and wished him well. Inside the capital, the members of the group called 100 fought hard. Their skills in battle showed that real strength came from standing up for what was right, not just using power. They defeated their enemies with little trouble and made it clear that violence alone could never truly end conflict. One of the White Knights shouted that the 100 were nothing more than thugs. Mars quietly agreed, but the knights reminded him that they still had the Mage Corps on their side. Mars froze when he heard that. At the Mage Tower, Frau's father told her that Prince Mars had started a rebellion. Frau calmly asked her father to step down and give her the family title. He was shocked and said he wasn't ready to give up his position. He also said he didn't believe a woman could lead the family. Frau responded by casting a spell, showing that she had joined the rebellion. She explained her plan would start with a shock spell. Then she would use lightning, followed by explosion, and finally a spell to dissolve everything. No one wanted to be caught in those spells. Her father tried to calm her down, but she cast lightning again and asked him to give her the family title, just this once in her life. The huge blast of magic quickly caught Prince Mars's attention. The White Knights began to wonder why the mages hadn't joined the battle yet. Mars thought that maybe Frau had finally taken action. He entered the castle, and Frau told him to leave the rest to them. At the same time, Gourmet stepped forward, surprised that Mars had really started a rebellion. He said Mars had sealed his own fate, but before anything could happen, 5 adventurers suddenly appeared and warned Mars to get ready for battle. The group told him they were there to end his life. Mars turned to his father, who looked back at him with fear in his eyes. In that moment, Mars remembered how his father never really tried to find out what happened to his mother. It seemed like his father only cared about staying alive, not about learning the truth. One girl in the group used a spell that controlled gravity. The magic held Mars in place and he couldn't move. Gourmet proudly said they had finally trapped the prince using magic. He said Mars's attempt to fight back had surprised him, but he was ready for it. He also said that he had paid strong adventurers to help, and that even more backup was on the way to surround Mars. Then something happened that shocked everyone. Prince Mars calmly moved and broke free from the gravity bracelets all by himself. The girl who cast the spell gasped in shock. Another person in the group shouted that the gravity magic should have worked. Mars explained that the spell did work, but he had gotten used to its force. The group stood there, stunned. They admitted they had never seen anyone resist gravity magic like that before. Then, another member of the group tried to take Mars down with a new attack. Mars reacted quickly and slashed the bag that the attacker had thrown. It released poison from a poisonous lizard, and it entered his body. The thief warned him that he would be paralyzed soon. But Mars stayed calm and said the meat of poisonous reptiles tasted terrible. The thief was shocked. He couldn't believe that Mars had eaten one of those deadly creatures, beasts filled with pure poison. Suddenly, another member ran toward Mars with a sword, attacking fast and without holding back. Mars moved just as fast and defeated the attacker with a single, calm strike. The group froze in shock as their teammate's body hit the ground, cut and lifeless. One of them, now panicking, asked if the fallen fighter could be brought back. The healer said only a necromancer could do that. Mars gave a small smile and said sorry. He explained it had been a long time since he fought without holding back, so his control wasn't perfect. Right after that, the group attacked all at once. Mars defended himself by casting a spell that made a blade out of sound. A sharp sonic blade. It hit one of the attackers hard, cutting him open. The wounded thief cried out, begging the healer, Luida, to save him. Luida said she would need to be a saint to heal that kind of wound. Mars found her reply a bit funny. Still not giving up, the team's mage tried again. This time she used a strong fire spell. The flames were so powerful that Mars knew he couldn't dodge them, so he raised a magic shield which blocked the fire completely. The women in the group were stunned. They didn't expect anyone to stop such a powerful spell. The mage dropped to her knees, shocked. She had thought that was her strongest attack. The warrior couldn't believe that Mars had used a monster-level magic shield. Mars watched the situation with a small sense of satisfaction. He remembered how he had learned the special skill after fighting many battles against demonic apes. He had eaten their flesh over and over until he finally understood how to use the technique. With a calm look, Mars gave the group a chance to leave, saying he didn't plan to kill them. He told them they could walk away safely and he would not harm them. But one person in the group didn't accept his offer. That person accused Mars of insulting them. Angry, the person asked if Prince Mars really thought they would just walk away after he had already killed some of their friends. Before Mars could respond, an A-rank adventurer suddenly stepped forward and attacked without warning. Mars quickly got ready to defend himself, but he soon noticed that his enemy's sword skills were much better than he expected. He realized this fight would not be easy. Mars became serious and kicked the adventurer, sending him flying backward. The fighter, now on the ground, looked up in surprise and asked if Mars was a monk instead of a swordsman. Mars simply replied that his skills came from his master. As the fight came close to ending, Mars looked at Gamaris and said he was the last one left. Gamaris, shocked, thought about everything that had led up to this moment. He had spent many years working with nobles to stop the kingdom from falling apart. He had made tough decisions and lived with the consequences. He remembered how, 15 years earlier, the kingdom almost broke down because of what the former queen had done. To save the nation, he had convinced the king to lead a coup. Since then, he had worked carefully to keep things in order, building alliances with nobles to prevent more problems. But Prince Mars had always been a threat to that balance. Some nobles saw the prince as a tool they could use for power, which could destroy everything Gamaris had worked so hard to protect. Believing it was for the good of the kingdom, Gamaris had even tried to have Mars killed several times, but the prince had survived every attempt. Suddenly, the 100 stormed into the castle. They said that the noble factions had been defeated and pointed at Gamaris, saying he was the last one left. Mars stopped to think. Had the 100 really taken down all the nobles? And if they had, what would happen next? Who would lead the kingdom? When Gamaris saw the members of the 100, he realized that Mars had been Zeros all along. He was shocked that the prince had built such a group and had been preparing for this rebellion for a long time. Mars didn't believe the people from the 100 could lead the kingdom. He even thought about stepping back and letting his father become king. But when he mentioned it, his frightened father told him to just take the throne himself. Mars sighed, wishing his father would at least show a little doubt for once. Mars began to wonder if there was anyone else who knew how to rule. Then he looked at Gamaris and made a surprising decision. He handed over the job of leading the kingdom to him. Gamaris was completely confused by the unexpected responsibility. In the days that came after, the kingdom was quickly brought back to order. Not long after, Mars married Frau, as he had come to trust her because of her bravery during the Civil War. She had only been testing a spell that could hurt herself, but now she had a different interest. This time, she wanted to try a summoning ritual that needed a human sacrifice. Mars started to wonder if making her queen had been a smart choice. Agma and the others didn't stop scolding Mars for putting Gamaris in charge. Even Crom was worried about that decision. Mars realized he couldn't leave the kingdom's politics to these strong warriors who only cared about becoming tougher and proving their worth. After being given the role, Gamaris took it seriously. He praised Mars as a true ruler and promised to serve him with full loyalty. Eventually, the former king gave up his title and placed the crown on Mars's head. From that moment, Mars was officially named the new king. The crowd cheered loudly, and the hundreds swore their loyalty, vowing to follow Mars wherever he would go. Mars deep down only wanted to survive. By eating monster flesh, Prince Mars had unknowingly climbed his way to the throne. But one question still remained. Would he rebuild the kingdom, or what kind of future was waiting for him now? Not long after, a young man placed a severed arm on a table and asked a medic girl for help. Luida was shocked but quickly treated his wound. The young man smiled brightly. He called her his older sister and praised her healing skills as fitting for a true A-rank cleric. The young man Bruno had been injured during a match against Ogma. They were both members of the 100 and had fought each other in a ranking battle. Ogma was much stronger and ended up cutting off Bruno's right arm. Mars wondered how things had gotten to this point. After becoming king, Mars had seen how hard Gamaris worked every single day. With the money taken from the nobles, the kingdom's finances had gotten better. But Mars also realized he hadn't rewarded the 100 for their help during the uprising. So he gave the order to build a new arena since the old training grounds were no longer good enough. At first, Gamaris thought the arena would be used for public shows, and that the 100's ranking matches would become a national event, bringing in money from ticket sales. Mars said that wasn't his plan, but Gamaris came to a different conclusion anyway. He believed the king wanted to support gambling. He called the idea brilliant, turning the 100's ranking battles into a business for the nation. Gamaris pointed out that Fallon was a poor kingdom without strong industries. He guessed that Mars had already seen this problem back when he created the 100. Mars noticed the new misunderstanding but decided to go along with it. Gamaris promised that the arena would become a key part of the country's growth and said he would take care of everything right away. Mars didn't really care about the method as long as the kingdom prospered. In less than 6 months, the arena was finished. Because so many people came to watch the matches, the kingdom's money more than doubled. During one of the fights, a young fighter was seriously hurt. One of his teammates quickly ran to the cleric, Luida, and begged her to heal him. Luida checked the injured fighter and was shocked. She said there was no chance to save him. The teammate didn't want to believe it and asked why she would say that. Luida tried to explain that the fighter had already died. But then the boy she thought was dead began to cry. Ogma stepped in to calm the situation. He turned to Luida and warned her that if she refused to heal the fighter, more people could die in the future. Even though Luida wasn't sure it would work, she made a desperate prayer. Somehow, the young fighter, Barry, came back to life. After that, Luida scolded the group and warned them that if they bothered her like that again, she might turn the dead into undead instead. At the same time, one of the king's advisors asked for a special match. King Mars thought it was his responsibility to take part in these events now. Fighters in the arena, like Ogma, earned a lot of money, attention, and respect. Recently, the top 100 fighters had become famous. King Mars agreed to fight 10 of these strong fighters. Before the match, they told him to take off his armlet, just like he did during the rebellion. Back then, Mars was being challenged all the time, so he came up with a clever plan. If someone won a ranking match, he would give them a special match afterward. This way, they stayed excited and he could still stay in control. After hearing his plan, the top fighters supported it and proudly talked about their earlier victories. When the match started, they gave it everything they had. Even when they fell, they yelled that they would keep getting back up. As King Mars watched, he thought they looked like warriors who refused to stay down. He also questioned why he was the one always doing these matches. While others rested for 5 days, he was fighting almost every day. Even Gamaris said that whenever the king joined a match, the crowd grew bigger, so he should keep doing it as often as possible. King Mars began to feel more like a gladiator stuck in a cycle of endless battles. What made it harder was that no matter how many fighters he beat, they always stood up again. It was all because of the cleric Luida, who healed and revived them. He had hired her to help save lives, but he never thought it would turn into this never-ending problem. As he fought, the king kept thinking about complaining to Gamaris. But he knew Gamaris was already tired, busy, and focused on helping the kingdom. Because of that, Mars couldn't bring himself to say anything bad. Instead, he focused on winning. When he finally did, he realized the real challenge still waited: dinner. At the table, Luida was doing a magic ritual with a focused expression. She was trying to remove poison from her food and quietly wondered why she even had to eat something dangerous. As she used a spell to protect herself, the king turned to Gamaris and asked about the killer rabbits. Gamaris said they were almost gone and had nearly disappeared from the kingdom's lands. The king was surprised. He thought monsters could keep growing in number without any limits. Gamaris explained that the rabbits might not be dead, but had likely been pushed out. He also mentioned that even dragons were staying away from the kingdom's skies. This was because the 100 had been hunting them constantly for their meat. On top of that, the queen and her magic corps had also joined the hunts. The king started to wonder when the kingdom had become so dangerous for dragons. He said having fewer monsters might be a good thing, especially since killer rabbits were a serious threat. But then he was reminded that monster meat could be harmful to people who weren't used to eating it. New members of the 100 often got sick the first time they tried it. Looking down at his own plate, the king thought he would rather eat something that tasted better. He casually suggested to Gourmet that if the 100 really wanted monster meat, maybe they should try raising killer rabbits themselves. Gourmet paused, then asked if the king was truly serious about raising monsters like farm animals. The king nodded. His strange idea made Gourmet praise him for ignoring common sense and suggesting something out of this world. Mars noticed that Gourmet was really thinking about the idea, and it made him nervous. If they actually started raising monsters for food, other kingdoms might think they had lost their minds. Quickly, the king said that wasn't what he meant and told Gourmet to guess again. This time, Gourmet asked if the idea was meant for entertainment. The king said no. But while thinking more about it, he realized that raising monsters could help the army, just like how the northern kingdoms raised dragons for war. Gourmet suddenly shouted that he would now follow the king's vision and do what the northern kingdoms did. Use monsters to make their army stronger. The king was shocked. Was Gourmet really suggesting they use monsters in battle? Had he become a demon king without even knowing it? Gourmet went on, saying that monsters could be used in many ways, not just for war but maybe even for public shows. He admitted it was a risky plan, but one that might be worth trying. The king tried to speak, but suddenly no sound came out. He realized his wife, the queen, must have heard everything through their contract seal and had teleported to his side to silence him with magic. Feeling annoyed, he looked at her and asked in his mind if she really wanted to go through with the monster-raising idea. She didn't speak, she just nodded. Gourmet excitedly said he would begin preparing right away. Mars knew his wife too well. Once she made a decision, no one could stop her. Trying to stop her would only bring trouble. What the king didn't know was that the 100's constant hunting of monsters would soon lead to a disaster no one could escape. One day, a man entered the kingdom and claimed that the Mad King Mars would be held fully responsible. Monster production had started in the kingdom. Mars didn't really mind as long as his wife stayed happy, but he still wondered if adding monsters to their military was truly necessary. Their country was small, and nobody seemed interested in invading them. Deep down, he hoped this new plan would give him a way to avoid those difficult matches with the 100 members. One day, Frau happily showed Mars a pair of gravity bracelets, the same kind Mars wore. Frau said he wanted them to grow closer. Mars didn't understand what he was trying to do. Those bracelets were actually heavy shackles first made to keep prisoners from escaping. Anyone who committed a crime could get one for free. Right after that, Frau dropped another set of gravity bracelets into Mars's lap and said she made them herself. She explained that adding 5 times the gravity strength was very hard to do. Mars knew wearing those would be a hassle, so he told her he was fine with his current bracelet, which had 3 times the weight. Frau didn't like that answer and glared at him, bringing up Cassandra's name. She pointed out that her husband was wearing something given by another woman. Mars suddenly remembered that Frau could see everything he did because of their contract. Even the fact that Cassandra was his master, only Frau knew that. The poison ring and gravity bracelet he wore were both gifts from Cassandra, but to be honest, their effects were pretty bad. He thought Frau's jealousy was cute, but he didn't want her to compete like this. He said a magical item for protection would have been more useful, but Frau replied that it was a wife's duty to make her husband stronger. She sweetly asked if he was rejecting her gift. Mars wasn't sure what Frau was really thinking, but he knew she always gave her best for him. When people told her to cancel their engagement, she refused. Even during the rebellion, she risked her life for him. He didn't dislike her at all. She might lack some human emotions, but to him, she was his precious wife. So, he agreed to wear the bracelets and thanked her. Because of them, even the throne couldn't support his weight anymore. His wife's love had become both emotionally and physically heavy. Sometime later, a messenger from the nearby country of Cadenia arrived. Like Fallon, Cadenia bordered the forest where demon beasts lived. However, Cadenia had a longer history and was seen as a stronger and more respected nation. Both countries had a hard time dealing with the demon beasts, and keeping friendly ties between them was often difficult. The messenger brought a letter from Cadenia's king. This was one of the first real duties Mars had to deal with as king, but the message surprised him. The letter was a complaint. The king of Cadenia blamed Fallon for hunting too many monsters, which caused the beasts to run toward Cadenia's land. Mars was told to fix the problem by helping to hunt the monsters in Cadenia's area, and on top of that, pay them 3,000 gold coins as payment. Mars thought it was a serious problem. Fallon had hunted so many monsters that even dragons had started to avoid their country. When Mars saw how badly it affected other nations, he realized Fallon may have gone too far. He let his minister Gourmet read the letter. Gourmet thought it was unfair for Cadenia to blame Fallon for their monster troubles. He believed each country should handle its own monster problems and thought Cadenia was acting without pride. The messenger said Cadenia had handled things on their own in the past, but Fallon's heavy hunting had forced the monsters to flee into their lands. Now they were having a hard time dealing with the growing threat. Mars blamed the people of Fallon for creating such a problem. Then Crom, another official, reminded everyone that Fallon's national plan had always been to hunt monsters and develop the forest. He believed there was no reason for other countries to complain about that. Orga, another leader, said Cadenia should just take care of their own problems. If they had more monsters now, they could simply use the meat. In fact, they were lucky. Fallon had a shortage of monster meat and needed more. Still, Mars couldn't help but feel sorry for Cadenia. The messenger stayed quiet. He knew the demand was unfair from a diplomatic point of view, but the king of Cadenia was already angry. As a diplomat, he didn't have a choice. He had to deliver the demand to Fallon. Deep inside, he just wanted to go home. King Mars, who sat in front of him, was far too scary. Mars noticed the diplomat looking at him and gave a wide smile. That smile sent chills down the diplomat's spine. He remembered the stories he had heard. People said Mars used to be a troublemaker. When he lost his right to become king, he changed his name to Zeros, gathered a group of outlaws, started a rebellion, and killed the nobles who stood against him. Worse, he had even forced his people to eat monster meat, which was known to be poisonous. After he took the throne, Mars built an arena and made people fight inside it. The diplomat soon understood why. Mars wanted to earn money from gambling and entertain himself. He was truly a mad king. There was no way someone like him would ever agree to Cadenia's demand. Just when Gamara said that the meeting was over, King Mars suddenly said they would accept the request from Cadenia. Everyone in the throne room was shocked. The room went silent. Mars thought there were already many people in his kingdom excited to fight monsters. Plus, they had made plenty of money from the arena. It made sense to keep good ties with nearby kingdoms. Crom, one of the king's men, asked Mars to think twice. He warned that other countries might see their kingdom as weak if they gave in. Mars understood that, but he believed it was the other kingdoms that had caused the problem in the first place. Besides, he had a personal reason for agreeing. He wanted to take his wife on a trip to another country, but he couldn't say that out loud. Mars ordered his people to start preparing for the mission. He gave them 1 month to get ready. He chose Crom to lead the monster hunting expedition in Cadenia. Then Mars turned to the diplomat and asked if this plan sounded good. He also asked if Fallon's soldiers would be allowed into Cadenia. Overwhelmed with relief, the diplomat cried and said there would be no objections. He thanked King Mars for his kindness. After the Cadenia delegation left, Crom asked Mars why he had made that decision. Mars couldn't really admit that he just wanted to travel and came up with an excuse. So instead, he told them there was a chance that a monster stampede might happen. Somehow the others understood what he meant. Gamaris realized that the king had thought about the danger of a possible stampede. A stampede was when a huge number of monsters suddenly rushed into one area. No one knew the exact reason why this happened, but too much hunting in one place could trigger it. Right now, this kind of hunting was happening in Cadenia. Mars said that if something made the monsters even more aggressive, a stampede could start, and he asked what would happen to Cadenia if that occurred. Gamaris answered that the country would suffer terrible losses. He finally understood why the king wanted to take care of the monsters early. Mars was relieved that they believed his excuse. If a stampede really did happen in Cadenia, then Fallon would likely be the next target. In other words, this trip was also about protecting their own country. Gamaris praised Mars for coming up with a smart excuse. Mars then asked if Crom understood. Crom said he did and promised to let the Black Knights handle the monster problem. He swore they would succeed no matter what. Mars was surprised by how fired up Crom was, but at least they were serious about the mission. A month later, Mars and Frau were riding together in a carriage. This was their first trip as a couple, and Mars was excited. He believed the monster subjugation should have been completed by now, and that the king of Cadenia would welcome them warmly. But he started to wonder why they had so many guards with them. It was supposed to be a simple diplomatic visit, yet it looked more like they were preparing for war. Ogma then said they had reached Cadenia's capital, Moss. Mars looked out of the carriage and was shocked. He saw a massive number of monsters in the distance marching toward the capital's walls. He couldn't understand why the monsters were surrounding the city, especially since he had already ordered the Black Knights to wipe them out. About 2 weeks ago, Crom went to the Demon Beast Forest. At first, he couldn't believe he didn't understand the king's words. But later, everything started to make sense. He realized that Cadenia's foolish request had already been part of the king's plan. The king clearly wanted to start developing the Demon Beast Forest and didn't really care about the stampede. Instead, he planned to use it as a weapon. Crom believed that King Mars wanted to take control of Cadenia. He opened a bottle and poured a strange liquid on the ground. At that time, Fallon had been working on ways to create monsters in large numbers, and this liquid was one of their newest results. If they spread it across Cadenia's lands, it would attract monsters just like fire attracts moths. Cadenia would fall, but Crom was sure that Mars had already thought that through. He imagined that when the stampede reached its worst point, King Mars and Queen Frau would suddenly arrive and save the towns and villages. That way, Mars could gain power and influence in Cadenia. Crom laughed to himself. He thought the king's plan was smart and perfect. This battle would be the first step in King Mars's plan to conquer the continent. In the present, Ogma said that the Black Knights carried out the plan without any mistakes. Mars asked what plan he was talking about. Ogma then asked what they should do next. Stepping out of the carriage, Mars gave a clear order to his men: help the capital and wipe out every single monster. Mars was still confused. He remembered sending Crom to take care of the monsters, but right now he had to focus on getting rid of every last one of them. There were too many and he didn't have time to waste, especially not with the King of Cadenia waiting. Just then, Frau stepped forward, spoke a strong magic spell, and burned all the monsters outside in one powerful attack. Mars saw just how strong his wife really was, but things were even worse inside. The capital city was under attack. A knight captain named George met Mars and thanked him for the help. George admitted he didn't know how to explain what was going on and asked to speak with the King of Cadenia. Then, with a heavy heart, he revealed that the king had already left. When the king heard about the monster attack, he ran away with his royal guards. Mars was relieved he wouldn't have to say sorry for his own mistake. If he could defeat the monsters now, maybe no one would blame him. He asked if the monsters had attacked other places in Cadenia. George said they didn't have enough forces to hold back the monsters. Mars began to worry about the cost of repairs if the damage spread. He told George that he and his group would handle the monsters. George hesitated, saying they couldn't ask outsiders to help since Cadenia still had some pride left. Mars doesn't care about their pride. He was more worried about being blamed and scolded by Gamaris for the damage. He snapped at George, asking if he really wanted more people to die just to protect their pride. In the end, George gave in and agreed. Soon after, Ogma and the others returned. They reported that they had already cleared the monsters outside the castle and had taken care of most of the ones inside as well. George was shocked and found it hard to believe. Even Mars was surprised by how fast they had finished. But it made sense. These were the same people who had nearly wiped out all the monsters before. Mars praised them for their work and told them to finish the job. He ordered them to hunt down the remaining monsters in Cadenia and make sure not a single one escaped. Just before Mars and the others reached Moss, the king of Cadenia escaped with his knights. There was no way to stop the fall of his kingdom. He was supposed to report Fallon for not dealing with the monsters that were attacking Cadenia. The king complained that Fallon had broken their promise to deal with the threat. One soldier confirmed that the Black Knights had gone into the Demon Beast Forest. That made the king suddenly realize something. Maybe the Black Knights, or even King Mars himself, had planned this all along. At that moment, their carriage came to a stop. The king stepped outside to see what was going on. To his horror, he found that all of his men had already been killed. Their bodies were lying around, completely lifeless. The king began to shake in fear, and then Crom appeared and introduced himself. When the king realized that Crom was part of the Black Knights, he angrily brought up the broken promise. But Crom calmly said they had done their part. According to him, they had already taken down a lot of monsters, and by the time they got there, the number of monsters had dropped. The king shouted, asking why the capital was still under attack. Crom explained that one of the dangerous things about monsters was how the smell of dead monsters could attract even more powerful ones. If the job was done poorly, more monsters would just come. The king argued back, saying he had never heard of monsters attacking like that just because others were killed. Crom said there was another reason. He pulled out a small bottle and said it contained a potion made by Fallon's alchemists. This potion attracted monsters, and if it was mixed with monster blood, the effect became even stronger. He admitted that they had spread this potion from the forest all the way to the capital. The king was shocked. He couldn't believe they had caused the monster stampede on purpose. He blamed Crom for making it happen. Crom admitted their actions caused the stampede, but he also said that if Cadenia hadn't invited them and tried to play tricks, none of this would have happened in the first place. The king felt trapped and claimed that they could have simply refused to help instead. Crom replied that the king's foolish choices were actually part of King Mars's plan all along. Now that the truth was out, Crom said it was time to end things. He splashed the potion on the king's face and said it worked just fine even without monster blood. In a panic, the king begged for his life. He offered money and even land if Crom switched sides, but Crom didn't hesitate. He stabbed the king without a second thought. He said no one in their country would betray their people for money or land. The king fell to the ground, dead. Soon after, monsters came rushing in and surrounded his body. He became their meal just like that. As Crom watched, he decided to tell the others that the poor king of Cadenia had been eaten by monsters while trying to run away. 3 days later, the people of Cadenia sang praises to King Mars. He and his group had defeated the monsters and brought peace back to the land without much trouble. That part went well, but Mars became worried when he heard that the king of Cadenia had died. With the king gone, there was no one left to complain. but it also meant Mars couldn't return to Fallon just yet. When he reached the capital city of Moss, Mars sent his escort knights to hunt down any remaining monsters. He then visited several cities that were badly damaged and helped with the cleanup. While he was there, he threw some gold coins to the surviving citizens. He believed that spending gold on Cadenia's recovery might set a good example, and maybe in return, they wouldn't ask for reparations later. Everyone looked happy and seemed like they wouldn't misuse the money. Later, Mars met up again with the Black Knights. Crom gave a simple report. The king of Cadenia had died in a monster attack and his torn body was found on the road. The prime minister felt ashamed when he heard that their king had escaped alone and died. He said Cadenia couldn't continue as an independent country and quickly pledged loyalty to the kingdom of Fallon. Mars was surprised by how fast things changed. Still, all the citizens of Cadenia thanked him for saving them and for the money he gave. While Mars was surprised, George asked if they could talk. He told Mars that the princess of Cadenia wanted to meet him. George explained that Princess Rubis had stayed in the castle during all the chaos and never ran away like her father did. He shared her message, saying that she praised King Mars and really wanted to meet him in person. Mars couldn't ignore the compliment, especially from another royal. He agreed to meet her. George also said that the princess wanted the meeting to be private, just the two of them over dinner. Hearing this, Mars became worried. He knew it wouldn't really be a secret because Frau could still see and hear everything through the contract mark they shared. At the same time, Princess Rubis was thinking about what would happen to Cadenia now. Her royal family had lost the people's trust. The king had died in shame and now the citizens looked up to a foreign king instead. She had heard how Mars gave out gold after the disaster, which quickly won over the hearts of her people. She believed the gold must have come from the payment her father forced Fallon to give. Everything added up too well, but it was hard for her to accept how perfectly it all worked. Fallon had agreed to pay so easily, which should have raised questions from the beginning. Rubis began to wonder if everything had been planned by the so-called Mad King Mars. She thought maybe Mars had turned his own demands against them and caused the stampede himself, all to invade the country. She realized how cold and clever Mars really was. Even if she tried to blame Fallon for everything, she had no real proof. She would only sound like a foolish royal desperate to be believed. And even if she had the evidence, Mars's kindness and gifts had already won the people over. They wouldn't believe their own princess anymore. Princess Rubis now saw Mars not just as a strong king but also as a smart and careful planner. He was slowly gaining the trust of her people, but she knew the truth about him. To her, the Mad King Mars was a dangerous man. If he truly took control of Cadenia, she feared a great tragedy would follow. Maybe she was the only one who saw the danger, and so, for the good of her kingdom and its people, she made a choice. As the Princess of Cadenia, she swore she would be the one to end King Mars's life. Earlier, Rubis told George that the stampede had been planned by King Mars so he could take over Cadenia and make it part of Falloon territory. Since the people's support was already leaning toward Mars, she believed most of southern Cadenia was already under Falloon's control. To save their country, they had to defeat Mars. George, feeling worried, asked how they could do that since no one in Cadenia was strong enough to beat him. When King Mars and his 100 knights entered the capital, they quickly defeated monsters that even the Cadenian army couldn't handle. They were seen as living legends. Rubis said there was only one possible way, by poisoning him. George reminded her that King Mars's wife, Frau, was a powerful magician who could sense poison if she was around. Rubis then suggested inviting Mars to a private meal so she could poison him without anyone else knowing. She asked for George's help, saying that if things went wrong, she wanted the blame to fall only on her. She was willing to risk her life to stop a war and protect her country. Later, during the meal, Mars showed surprise at the variety of Cadenian dishes served, which were usually only found in royal courts. He thanked Rubis for the warm welcome. Rubis was shocked that Mars had actually come alone and without any protection. She felt guilty about her plan, but she knew it had to be done. Every dish on the table had been poisoned. Rubis did this so she could react quickly if Mars asked her to switch plates. Once he had eaten enough poison, she would be ready. She hoped to watch him suffer and die, though the thought made her nervous. She had never done anything like this before. Mars, noticing how tense she was, thought she looked oddly charming. Then he asked her what she wanted to talk about. Rubis began to speak about her grandfather, a respected noble from northern Cadenia. She had hoped to bring up political matters to catch Mars's attention, but she made a mistake. Mars didn't want to talk about politics. Instead, he was more interested in the food and wanted to discuss the traditional Cadenian dishes first. Rubis began to worry that Mars had already noticed the poison. To keep him eating, she encouraged him and even took a bite of the food herself. Mars continued eating and said the meal was incredibly tasty, especially the spicy flavors. Rubis was shocked. He kept eating every dish even though all of them were poisoned. She turned to George, asking what was happening. George assured her that Mars's food had definitely been poisoned. Rubis began to think that Mars might be more than human. The antidote she had taken wasn't perfect, and if she kept eating the same food as him, her life could be in serious danger. When Mars saw that Rubus was tense, he realized it was time to talk about politics. He asked her how old she was. Rubus answered that she was 14. Mars had expected that. After seeing her, he guessed she was the same age as his younger brother, Nickel. He then thought about making Nickel the leader of Cadenia. Since they were the same age, he hoped they would get along. Rubus was shocked. She had just heard what sounded like a political marriage proposal. She thought Mars was trying to marry his younger brother to her so he could take over her country without any problems. She couldn't believe how easily Mars had figured out her plans. She felt like she had been playing right into his hands the whole time. Mars asked her what she thought and told her that Nicole was good at politics and would likely get along with her. Rubus wanted to politely decline, as royalty should, but her head felt cloudy from all the poison she had taken. She just wanted the meeting to end so she could get the antidote. She simply said she would think about it in a good way. Mars was pleased to hear that. Rubus then excused herself, and Mars felt a little disappointed because there was still food left. The meeting ended quietly without any trouble. Right after, Mars contacted Gourmet back home through magic to tell him that he planned to put Nicole in charge of Cadenia. Gourmet was shocked by the news. He thought Mars was planning to have Nicole marry the princess of Cadenia and become its king. Gourmet cried with joy. Nicole was Mars's half-brother, and when Mars became king, people thought Nicole would be killed. Even though Nicole had tried to assassinate him before, Mars had spared his life. It wasn't just out of kindness, but because he had been preparing Nicole for this future role, marrying the princess of a taken country. Gourmet was amazed by how far ahead Mars had planned. After that, Nicole and his mother went to greet King Mars. Nicole's mother thanked him for giving her son such an important match. Both of them knelt before the king. Nicole thanked his older brother for trusting him with a big responsibility and promised he wouldn't let him down. Mars was confused about why Nicole brought their mother and mentioned something like a good match. Still, he was glad to see that his brother looked motivated. He told Nicole to work with Rubus and to do his best. Nicole then asked where Rubus was. Mars said she was supposed to be in the castle, but people said she wasn't feeling well. Frau offered to go with Nicole, and Mars quickly agreed. He thought a short castle tour would be fine. As long as Frau was there, nothing should go wrong. Confident and glowing, Frau told him to leave everything to him. Later at Cadenia Castle, Frau easily defeated the castle knights without much effort. He told them not to block the path of Cadenia's future king. Georg told them to stop and pointed out that they were being too rough inside another country's castle. But Frau reminded them that Lord Nickel came all the way to see his future wife, and yet they were stopping him. Georg realized that this marriage must have been Fallon's plan. Nicole stepped forward and explained that the matter had already been settled between his grandfather Gourmet and Rubus's grandfather, Duke Gordon. He said both families were happy about the marriage, and he even thanked Mars for his support. Georg couldn't believe that Duke Gordon would agree to something like that. But Nickel said the Duke didn't seem to mind the idea of his granddaughter becoming queen. Then Nickel warned Georg, asking if he really wanted people to know what the princess had done to his brother. Georg looked shocked and asked what he meant. Nickel said it was the same in every country. Many people wanted to harm his brother, but they were all foolish. He added that a real king couldn't be defeated by ordinary people. Frau stepped in, now sounding threatening, and asked Georg if he still wanted to fight. He said he didn't mind either way. At that moment, Georg understood there was nothing more they could do. Just then, Rubus came out of the room and told Georg to stoop. She came out of her room, looking stressed out with visible dark spots under her eyes. She asked Nicole to enter her room alone, and Nicole quickly agreed. The two sat down to talk. Rubus asked what they wanted from her. Nicole said they didn't want anything. He explained that they only hoped to build a better Cadenia together. Rubus replied that Cadenia had already been a good country, even before Fallon got involved. Nicole questioned that idea. He said that if Cadenia had truly been a good country, then its people would have supported his brother without hesitation. He added that if the country had been well managed, no foreign power would have felt the need to interfere. He asked her who she thought a country was meant to serve. Rubus answered that a country was for the people. Nicole agreed, and said that was exactly why she should join them, because no one cared for the people more than his older brother. Rubus became angry. She said that was nonsense. Even children had heard of Fallon's so-called Mad King. Everywhere he went, there were battles, bloodshed, and death. He had taken power using bandits and killed the nobles. He even ate the poisoned flesh of monsters and built an arena just for fun. She didn't think he was even a decent person, much less a proper king. Nickel didn't argue with all of that. However, he pointed out that his brother had never harmed innocent people. He explained that Mars had removed nobles who ignored the people's needs and had fought monsters that threatened villages and towns. Nicole said that his brother had strong support from the people of Fallon, and now he hoped the people of Cadenia would support him too. He added that with the nobles gone in Fallon, there were no more middlemen stealing money from taxes. The country's income grew, and the people had fewer burdens. Nicole claimed that no one in Fallon spoke badly about his brother. Rubus was shocked. Everything she had believed in felt like it had suddenly fallen apart. Nicole then invited her to visit Fallon someday to see the truth with her own eyes. Then Nicole smiled and said he was happy. Rubus was surprised by his sudden change in mood. Nicole admitted that he was glad to know his future bride was both smart and kind. Rubus blushed and her mood softened. With that killer smile, Rubus agreed to marry Nicole. Their wedding became a grand celebration. It also marked the moment when Cadenia officially became part of Fallon. Mars felt relieved that they could finally have peace with Cadenia. However, this clueless Cupid still wondered why the two young people had ended up getting married. Somewhere far away, a group of men went to ask King Dorson for help in taking back the kingdom of Cadenia. Dorson looked down on them, calling them useless for losing their own land. He believed Falun should never have been able to conquer their kingdom so easily. Yet, since the Mad King had taken the throne, Falun had become something completely different. Dorson found it hard to believe that such a small kingdom had used the stampede as an excuse to swallow Cadenia overnight. They were too small to be a real threat, but their ambition was now impossible to ignore. Dorson thought Falun was growing far too bold for its size. He told the petitioners that even he could not ignore what was happening anymore. The people of Cadenia thanked him, but Dorson secretly thought they were fools. He planned to use the two royal heirs as his puppets. Once they reclaimed Cadenia, they would serve as his eyes and ears. First, they would send a formal request for the throne's return. If Falun agreed peacefully, that would be convenient. But Dorson already knew they would refuse. A war was unavoidable. Still, if they won, Dorson could rule from the shadows. He would let those two fools keep their royal titles, since he did not care what became of their kingdom afterward. His true goal was to stop Falun's rise before it spread any further. Not long after, Nicole and Rubus received the petition letter and quickly told Mars about it. Mars asked if the letter truly demanded that the throne be given back to Cadenia's former crown prince. He also asked if it was really from King Dorson. Gourmet confirmed it was, and mentioned there was a second letter for Mars as well. When Mars read it, he saw that Nicole warned him about an upcoming war with Dorson and asked him to send Falun's strongest forces. Mars was surprised, not because of the war, but because Nicole, the quiet and bookish boy, was now speaking of battle. Mars had given Cadenia to Nicole, thinking he would keep it peaceful. Mars did not care much about Cadenia since it was never truly theirs to begin with. But after Nicole married Rubus and became king, Mars started to wonder what had changed in him during those short 2 weeks of marriage. Hearing that a war had started in Dorsey, Ogma and the others immediately rose up. They looked excited to join the fight and crush their enemies. The Red Knights also offered to help and even suggested invading Dorson as well. Mars grew worried and hoped that Gourmet would oppose the idea of war. But Gourmet believed this was something Mars had already expected and said it was time to finally use the monster army. Mars felt lost and confused. He did not want war. He wanted peace. He then asked everyone not to act recklessly, saying there was no point in rushing in. The others assured him that everything would be done with proper preparation. Mars began to wonder if they were really thinking the same way as he was. Later at the training grounds, Ogma gathered the warriors and announced that Dorson was demanding they hand over Cadenia. Mars watched from nearby. Ogma angrily asked if they would just sit and watch while Cadenia was taken from them. Everyone shouted in disagreement. Ogma then raised their morale, telling them to crush Dorson and make them pay for the insult. Mars could not believe they had gathered like this without asking for his permission. Now they were even making Dorson look like villains. He also remembered that giving such a speech without the ruler's consent was considered an act of aggression in his kingdom. Ogma then told everyone to calm down and explained that Dorson was serious about this conflict. Their soldiers were said to be well-trained, fully equipped, and expected to outnumber them 5-1. The others were shocked, but Ogma quickly did simple math. He told them that if each of them killed 5 enemies, they would win. Mars was stunned by such thinking. He wondered what kind of logic treated war like an easy math problem. Ogma asked if everyone could handle 5 enemies each. He reminded them that he was Hundred's current #1 and proudly declared he would bring back 50 heads as an offering to Zeros. Mars did not want those heads. The others grew even more excited and shouted that they would bring back 10 or 20 heads instead. Mars could already imagine the bloody scene and the piles of heads they spoke of. He looked both worried and disappointed. He then asked Gourmet if the people really wanted this war. Gourmet told him that everyone supported it and wanted to see Dorson crushed for their insult. They hoped that the names of 0 and 100 would spread across the land. Mars realized there was no escaping the coming war. Later, an anti-war council meeting was held. However, even the military officials were eager to start a war, especially with the people supporting it. One of them was even excited to use their monster army. Mars realized he could no longer back down. With a cold tone, he agreed to go to war with Dorson. After the meeting, Mars and his wife Frau went to check the site where the mass monster production program was being carried out. A mage under Frau's command was in charge of the project. Mars had ignored this matter for a long time, but with war approaching, he wanted to see the situation himself. There, a female mage named Kelly introduced herself as a monster research specialist. Mars noticed her sharp eyes and asked if she was truly from the mage nation of Kiel. He wondered why someone like her would come to Falun. Kelly explained that while Kiel valued magic deeply, it refused to recognize the importance of monster research. She said she was exiled because of a small incident that caused some damage, which she believed should have been called progress. Mars quickly understood what had happened. Kelly had created a monster that went out of control, leading to several deaths. To him, she seemed like a dangerous person. He glanced at his wife, but Frau only signaled him to continue. So Mars decided to hear Kelly out. He asked how the monster army was progressing. Kelly proudly said it was going well, since building such an army had always been her dream. She explained that while it was illegal in Kiel, here in Falun she could work freely, so she was putting her heart into it. Mars could hardly believe what he was hearing. He guessed that her obsession was the reason she had been banished, and for the record, he had never told her she could do whatever she wanted. Kelly went on to say that everyone admired Mars for using monsters in war, for food, and even for entertainment. They called him the real king of Falun. Mars asked who those people were. Kelly happily described how everyone knew the story of Zeros, Mars's alter ego who had taken the throne with a group of outlaws, crushed anyone who resisted, and now ruled without morals or restraint. Mars was shocked to hear how far his reputation had fallen. He sounded like a villain. But Kelly quickly added that, in the mage world, he was a legend. She said people admired him for allowing human experimentation for magical progress. Because of Mars's belief in magic first, life second, mages from all over the world praised him. Falun had become a safe haven for brilliant researchers like her. This made Mars realize that many who were exiled for unethical experiments had now gathered in his kingdom. In truth, it was Frau who had been doing the human experiments, not him. He gave his wife a cold look, but Frau simply ignored him in silence. Kelly assured him that they were making good progress with monster farming. Even the nearly extinct horned rabbits recovered quickly once they were protected from the members of 100. She said it was amazing to see how monsters now ran away whenever they saw humans. Mars was surprised by that. He then asked where the monster army was. Kelly pointed to a nearby tent, and when Mars looked inside, he found fierce-looking wolves. He was shocked by how large they were, though there were only 10 of them. Kelly explained that they had been feeding the wolves monster meat. They already hunted monsters, but eating rare high-grade meat made them grow much faster. She said the leftovers from the stampede helped a lot, and that she also added her own potions to give them huge stat boosts. Mars grew worried since there were only a few of them for the coming war. Kelly calmed him, saying that this group was only the core unit. The rest of the trained wolves were roaming freely in the Demon Beast Forest. She said the alpha wolf kept expanding its territory every day, and that the war wolf pack was breeding quickly. She even mentioned how cute their young looked. Kelly added that the alpha would still obey only Zeros or Mars himself. Mars was confused about why an alpha warwolf would listen to him. Kelly asked if he didn't remember what happened about a year ago when he brought back an alpha warwolf that was shaking in fear and badly hurt. She wondered if he had beaten it almost to death. Mars remembered he might have. Kelly explained that the alpha now saw Mars as the ultimate predator. Whenever Zero's name was mentioned, it obeyed right away. Because of that, taming the wolves went surprisingly well. The alpha he had captured before was actually a high-tier leader, and now they had over 1,000 monsters under their command. Kelly said the monster army was fully prepared. Still, Mars couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, even though they were finally ready to face Dorson's army. This would be Falun's first large-scale war under his command, and while the battle drew near, Mars wished it wouldn't have to happen. Soon after, in the Brix Plains north of Cadenia, the invading Dorson army appeared. The joint forces of Falun and Cadenia gathered to face them. The clash that later became known as the Battle of Brix began there. The mages from Falun started casting spells toward the invading army. However, the enemy mages managed to create barriers to protect themselves from harm. Even so, they felt uneasy after sensing that Falun's magic was stronger than theirs. They asked if they should fight back, but General Kinbri of Dorson told them it was not necessary. He believed Falun had only around 2,000 soldiers, while his own army had about 10,000, 5 times their number. His troops were trained for battles like this and were fully prepared. Still, there was one thing Kinbri could not ignore: the Queen of Falun, Frau the Thunder Empress. He remembered hearing that she had been a prodigy since her youth. It was said that her magic alone could change the course of battle. Yet, even with her power, Kinbri remained confident in their advantage. He saw no reason to waste energy on countering their spells. His mage corps would keep the barriers active, draining the Falun mages of their mana. Once their magic ran out, Dorsen's numbers would overwhelm them. But there was another concern: King Zeros of Falun. Kinbri had heard stories of how Zeros took the throne by force and proved himself unmatched in the country's arena. His name had spread quickly after the Cadenia stampede. Many believed he carried the blood of his ancestor, the hero blessed by the gods. Even so, Dorsen had its own secret weapons to rely on. Before long, the soldiers reported that Falun's magic attacks had stopped. Kinbri then ordered his knights to advance. The Dorsen knights charged across the battlefield and clashed with the black-armored knights of Falun. Kinbri was surprised by how firmly Falun's troops stood their ground despite being outnumbered. He had expected resistance, but not this level of strength. Still, he believed the outcome was certain. With 10,000 soldiers against only 2,000, he was sure of victory. No matter how skilled Falun's fighters were, they could not overcome such a large difference. To Kinbri, war was a matter of numbers, and he had already seen his win ahead of him. Meanwhile, Mars quietly watched as the war unfolded before his eyes. He found it impressive how well-trained the Dorsen troops were, always fighting in pairs or even 3 against 1. Ogma then reported that the lower ranks were reaching their limits and Mars could see it happening. Thanks to Ogma and the others holding back, even the lower-ranked members of the 100, those outside the top 10, were getting their first real taste of battle. If the top ranks had fought seriously, the lower ranks would never have a chance to fight. Mars believed that fighting monsters and fighting people were very different. Just like arena duels were not the same as real battles, no one knew when the next war would come, so it was better for everyone to get used to fighting together now. He also told the Red and Black Knights commanders Warren and Crom, as well as his wife Frau, to hold back their strength in this fight. This way, the second unit would face a tough but fair battle. He hoped the Dorsen forces would pull back soon since too much damage could leave grudges behind. When Ogma asked if they should start sending the upper ranks, Mars agreed and told him to slowly switch them in. Later on the battlefield, the Dorsen forces grew confident as they felt they had the upper hand. Then a giant figure appeared and swung a massive weapon, blowing away the Dorsen knights. Deep dents were left on their armor. A large man stood there, fearsome and calm, blood dripping from the heavy club he carried. Everyone felt relieved when they saw Wan Fu, who was as strong as 100 men. Wan Fu, ranked 30th among the 100, was once a lumberjack. His motto was simple: don't block it, dodge it. He was a powerhouse with unbelievable strength. Wan Fu tore through the Dorsen knights using his weapon, the bloody rod which Mars had given him. It was made from a rare giant tree they had cut down together. Heads flew and rolled across the field as Wan Fu crushed the advancing enemy knights. The bloody rod was too hard to shape and too heavy to wield for most men, but Wan Fu never cared. The knights were terrified of him and called him a monster. General Kinbri soon received reports that the front lines were falling back. He found it hard to believe because their army had 5 times more soldiers than Falun. He thought there was no way the battle could turn so easily unless King Zeros himself had joined the fight. However, the soldier reported that several enemy elites had appeared, but it did not seem to be Zeros. Still, those elites were overwhelming their squads, and even the 3-man tactics were not holding up. Their forces were being crushed one by one. Hearing that, Kinbri assumed that the high-ranking members of the 100 had finally made their move. He wondered if they should retreat, but their current momentum was strong. If they pulled back now, the entire army might collapse. He questioned whether it was better to keep fighting and risk their forces breaking apart. At that moment, someone stepped forward and asked the general to let them join the battle. They were Dorsen's strongest fighters, usually saved for facing Zeros himself. 2 knights from the Knights of the 5 Thrones, Matthias and Dante. Matthias said they had been waiting too long and were eager to fight. Kinbri allowed them to go but ordered them only to buy time for the main force to retreat. He warned them not to chase too far since Zeros had not yet made a move. Back on the battlefield, Wan Fu was enjoying himself. In Falun's arena, he had never managed to win, but on the battlefield he wanted to prove his true strength. Before the enemy's top fighters arrived, he planned to crush as many as he could. Someone nearby commented on how big he was. Wan Fu swung his massive rod backward to strike whoever had spoken, but the enemy dodged with ease and angrily asked who he was. Matthias was surprised that Wan Fu could even speak, given how monstrous he looked. He introduced himself as one of the 5 Thrones and wondered if Wan Fu had heard of him. Wan Fu recognized the title right away. It belonged to Dorsen's strongest 5 warriors. He shouted that he was Wan Fu of the 100 and declared he would crush Matthias. He swung his huge weapon with all his strength, but instead of landing a hit, he was sliced apart like butchered meat. Wan Fu fell to the ground, defeated. Matthias said he would have finished him off, but his only mission was to buy time. He then ordered the Dorsen knights to retreat under the general's command and asked that Zeros consider this battle a draw. Mars watched as the Dorsen knights retreated from the battlefield. Ogma asked if they should chase after them, but Mars told everyone to stay put and focus on treating the wounded instead. The Dorsen forces had suffered heavy losses. though not enough to destroy them completely. Falloon's soldiers, however, gained real battle experience from the fight, and Mars believed that was already a victory on its own. He hoped things could end peacefully, without any lasting grudges or more bloodshed. Later that day in the camp, Ogma complained that he was already reaching his limit. Crom replied that the real fight had not even begun. Ogma argued that he had not fought yet and that it was not the time to hold back by only giving orders from behind. He also pointed out how Crom looked like someone ready to kill, which made everyone else nervous around him. Warren then said they should all go all out together the next day, with no more holding back. Crom agreed, saying the plan to let the lower-ranked soldiers gain experience was only meant for the first day. Ogma promised that he would be the first to fight next time. Meanwhile, Frau was also running out of patience. She was excited to finally unleash her full magic and could hardly wait to show what she could do. Meanwhile, in the Dorson army's camp, the general sat deep in thought, unsure of what to do next. He knew the 100 were not the kind of enemies that could be beaten with a single move. That was why he had planned for every possible situation. He was not overconfident, yet seeing their main force take such heavy damage made him wonder how strong Falloon's army truly was. Suddenly, a soldier rushed in and reported that their supply unit on the way to camp had been ambushed and completely wiped out. The general, filled with anger, demanded to know how that was possible since the route passed through lands owned by Cadenian nobles who were supposed to be on their side. He began to suspect betrayal. However, the soldier quickly explained that it was not humans but a massive horde of monsters that attacked their supplies. The general was stunned. He questioned if the report was even true. Monsters were known to exist in the south, but there were not supposed to be large hordes in northern Cadenia. The thought struck him that this might also be the work of the Mad King. Earlier that day, the supply unit had been traveling when monsters hid nearby, waiting for Kelly's signal. Once she raised her hand, the warwolves charged forward in huge numbers. The enemy soldiers were torn apart as limbs flew through the air and blood soaked the ground. Kelly watched with satisfaction as all 500 of her beasts worked together in perfect harmony. She told them to eat as much as they could and leave nothing behind. Back at camp, some Dorson officers refused to believe that anyone could control monsters, but the general ordered them to prepare for the worst. Even the earlier monster stampede had strangely benefited Falloon's forces. With their supply unit destroyed, the Dorson army's entire operation was now in danger. Realizing this, the general decided to pull back while they still had the strength. The officers could only click their tongues in frustration, unable to argue. The general then commanded that the retreat would begin at dawn, and everyone should get ready to move. Morning soon arrived, and urgent news reached the general once again. A soldier reported that Falloon's army had begun to move. The other soldiers were full of energy, even though they knew they would soon run out of supplies. They believed their greater numbers gave them the upper hand. Leading the attack was none other than the Mad King, Mars himself. Mars never expected things to turn out this way. The night before, Ogma had reported that the Dorson forces were preparing to retreat. He shouted that they still needed to carve Mars's terror into their hearts so they would never dare to challenge them again. He insisted this was the perfect time for the king to take the field. Mars, however, felt disappointed with Ogma. The war was almost over and he wanted it to end without more bloodshed. That was why he had carefully targeted the enemy's supply unit and felt relieved that his ally had not been spotted. If any problems appeared, he planned to solve them without using force. He tried to share his thoughts with his men, but Warren interrupted, claiming he already understood. He believed Mars had been holding himself back for too long, and urged him to unleash his strength. Mars was stunned that no one truly understood him. He tried to explain that standing in the front lines was too much, but Crom misunderstood and thought Mars wanted to lead the charge. Crom proudly declared that unlike the spoiled royals from other nations, their king would always fight beside his men. Mars quietly wondered when their strategy had ever included sending the king to the front line. Yet everyone from 100 cheered loudly for their ruler, their morale burning high. Pressured by their faith, Mars had no choice but to lead them into battle. As the fight began, Mars moved coldly and silently, cutting through enemies one by one. Ogma crushed everyone who crossed his path. The Dorson general, watching in panic, asked why Falloon was attacking like this. Even without supplies, they should have been difficult to approach because Dorson had more troops. One of his officers pointed to the sky. There they saw Frau, known as the Thunder Empress, gathering her magic power. She began chanting words they recognized. The Dorson mages quickly raised their barriers, realizing what was coming. With a calm and chilling stare, Frau looked down upon them as she completed her spell. It was the ultimate magic that had earned her the name Thunder Empress. She unleashed Thunder Judgment. A massive lightning strike crashed down on the Dorson army, burning everyone caught in its path. Thick smoke rose from the battlefield. Frau finally looked at ease after releasing such powerful magic. The Dorson officers stood in shock, unable to understand what was happening. Frau had done nothing the previous day, and now they realized she had only been saving her strength. Their barriers had held before, but keeping them up all day had drained their energy. Their mage corps were now completely exhausted and unable to defend themselves. The general realized that this was King Mars's plan all along. He believed Mars had waited for the right moment to strike and had now sent his elite soldiers into battle. The general silently praised him for being a clever strategist. He then called over Matthias and Dante, ordering them to take his personal knights and face Falun's army head-on to bring down King Mars. It didn't take long for the two knights to find Mars on the battlefield. They even had a brief moment to introduce themselves. Mars calmly said he was the king of Falun and declared that he would fight the two of them while leaving the rest to his soldiers, the 100. Ogma and the others assured him they could handle it. Matthias and Dante thought Mars was arrogant for daring to face both of them alone. Matthias began his fierce series of thrusts. Mars blocked them with ease at first, but soon noticed the attacks were coming faster and striking weak spots in his armor. He realized Matthias was a speed-type swordsman. Mars then kicked him away, but before he could follow up, Dante appeared from above and swung his sword down hard. Mars blocked the hit and quickly understood that Dante was the power-type fighter. He was impressed by how strong Dante was despite never eating monster meat. Mars pushed them back with his shield, surprising both of them. He then removed his weighted gear and asked if they wanted to surrender. Matthias scoffed and thought Mars was getting overconfident for blocking their attacks with strange tricks. They said the 2-on-1 fight was far from over. Mars warned them that he would no longer hold back, and that they could die if they continued. He removed the gravity gauntlets Frau had given him, which had been limiting his movements 5-fold. Without the extra weight, his body moved much faster. Matthias realized in shock that Mars had been holding back the entire time. He shouted that they would never surrender and charged forward. In an instant, Mars appeared in front of him and slashed his chest open. Dante didn't even see him move. He tried to counterattack, but Mars was faster and cut through his abdomen. Dante's upper body flipped in the air before crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. The soldiers of the 100 cheered and praised their king. The Dorsan army stood frozen, unable to believe even the 5 thrones had fallen. Crom and Warren continued their rampage, cutting through the enemy ranks. The Dorsan general tried to gather his remaining men to retreat, thinking they could regroup and fight another day. But Ogma found him and sliced him cleanly in half. Blood poured from the general's body like a fountain as Ogma grinned. Soon after, King Dorsan received the grim news that his army had been crushed. With 70% of his forces gone, he knew the war could not continue. Just as he was about to seek peace, a mysterious woman appeared before him. She told the king that peace was unnecessary and boldly offered to kill King Mars herself.